on Dr. Paul Deussen. More than a decade has passed since a young German student, one of 8 children of a not very well to do clergyman, heard on a certain day Professor Lassen lecturing on a language and literature new, very new even at that time, to European scholars, namely Sanskrit. The lectures were, of course, free, for even now it is impossible for anyone in any European university to make a living by teaching Sanskrit, unless indeed the university backs him. Lassen was almost the last of that heroic band of German scholars, the pioneers of Sanskrit scholarship in Germany. Heroic certainly they were. What interest except their pure and unselfish love of knowledge could German scholars have had at that time in Indian literature? The veteran professor was expounding a chapter of Shakuntala, and on that day there was no one present more eagerly and attentively listening to Lassen's exposition than our young student. The subject matter of the exposition was, of course, interesting and wonderful, but more wonderful was the strange language, the strange sound of which, although uttered with all those difficult peculiarities that Sanskrit consonants are subjected to in the mouths of unaccustomed Europeans, had strange fascination for him. He returned to his lodgings, but that night sleep could not make him oblivious of what he had heard. A glimpse of a hitherto unknown land had been given to him, a land far more gorgeous in its colors than any he had yet seen, and having a power of fascination never yet experienced by his young and ardent soul. Naturally, his friends were anxiously looking forward to the ripening of his brilliant paths, and expected that he would soon enter a learned profession which might bring him respect, fame, and above all, a good salary and a high position. But then there was this Sanskrit. The vast majority of European scholars had not even heard of it then. As for making it pay, I have already said that such a thing is impossible even now. Yet his desire to learn it was strong. It has unfortunately become hard for us modern Indians to understand how it could be like that. Nevertheless, there are to be met within Varanasi and Nadia and other places even now, some old as well as young persons among our Pandits, and mostly among the sannyasins, who are mad with this kind of thirst for knowledge for its own sake. Students, not placed in the midst of the luxurious surroundings and materials of the modern Europeanized Hindu, and with 1,000 times less facilities for study, poring over manuscripts in the flickering light of an oil lamp night after night, which alone would have been enough to completely destroy the eyesight of the students of any other nation, traveling on foot hundreds of miles, begging their way all along, in search of a rare manuscript or a noted teacher, and wonderfully concentrating all the energy of their body and mind upon their one object of study, year in and year out, till the hair turns grey and the infirmity of age overtakes them. Such students have not, through God's mercy, as yet disappeared altogether from our country. Whatever India now holds as a proud possession has been undeniably the result of such labor on the part of her worthy sons in days gone by. And the truth of this remark will become at once evident on comparing the depth and solidity, as well as the unselfishness and the earnestness of purpose of India's ancient scholarship with the results attained by our modern Indian universities. Unselfish and genuine zeal for real scholarship and honest, earnest thought must again become dominant in the life of our countrymen if they are ever to rise to occupy among nations a rank worthy of their own historic past. It is this kind of desire for knowledge which has made Germany what she is now, one of the foremost, if not the foremost, among the nations of the world. Yes, the desire to learn Sanskrit was strong in the heart of this German student. It was long, uphill work, this learning of Sanskrit. With him, too, it was the same world old story of successful scholars and their hard work, their privations and their indomitable energy, and also the same glorious conclusion of a really heroic achievement. He thus achieved success, and now not only Europe, but all India knows this man, Paul Deussen, who is the professor of philosophy in the University of Kiel. I have seen professors of Sanskrit in America and in Europe, Some of them are very sympathetic towards Vedantic thought. I admire their intellectual acumen and their lives of unselfish labor. But Paul Deussen, or as he prefers to be called in Sanskrit, Devasena, and the veteran Max Muller have impressed me as being the truest friends of India and Indian thought. It will always be among the most pleasing episodes in my life, my first visit to this ardent Vedantist at Kiel, his gentle wife who travelled with him in India, and his little daughter, the darling of his heart, and our travelling together through Germany and Holland to London, and the pleasant meetings we had in and about London. The earliest schools of Sanskritists in Europe entered into the study of Sanskrit with more imagination than critical ability. They knew a little, expected much from that little, and often tried to make too much of what little they knew. Then, in those days, even such vagaries as the estimation of Shakuntala as forming the high watermark of Indian philosophy were not altogether unknown. These were naturally followed by a reactionary band of superficial critics, more than real scholars of any kind, who knew little or nothing of Sanskrit, expected nothing from Sanskrit studies, and ridiculed everything from the East. While criticizing the unsound imaginativeness of the early school, to whom everything in Indian literature was rose and musk, these in their turn went into speculations, which, to say the least, were equally highly unsound and indeed very venturesome. And their boldness was very naturally helped by the fact that these over hasty and unsympathetic scholars and critics were addressing an audience whose entire qualification for pronouncing any judgment in the matter was their absolute ignorance of Sanskrit. What a medley of results from such critical scholarship! Suddenly, on one fine morning, the poor Hindu woke up to find that everything that was his was gone. One strange race had snatched away from him his arts, another his architecture, and a third, whatever there was of his ancient sciences. Why, even his religion was not his own. Yes, that too had migrated into India in the wake of a Pahlavi cross of stone. After a feverish period of such treading on each other's toes of original research, a better state of things has dawned. It has now been found out that mere adventure without some amount of the capital of real and ripe scholarship produces nothing but ridiculous failure, even in the business of Oriental research, and that the traditions in India are not to be rejected with supercilious contempt, as there is really more in them than most people ever dream of. There is now happily coming into existence in Europe a new type of Sanskrit scholars, reverential, sympathetic, and learned. Reverential because they are a better stamp of men, and sympathetic because they are learned. And the link which connects the new portion of the chain with the old one is, of course, our Max Muller. We Hindus certainly owe more to him than to any other Sanskrit scholar in the West, and I am simply astonished when I think of the gigantic task which he, in his enthusiasm, undertook as a young man and brought to a successful conclusion in his old age. Think of this man without any help, poring over old manuscripts, hardly legible to the Hindus themselves, and in a language to acquire which takes a lifetime even in India, without even the help of any needy pundit whose brains could be picked, as the Americans say, for 10 shillings a month, and a mere mention of his name in the introduction to some book of very new researches. Think of this man, spending days and sometimes months in elucidating the correct reading and meaning of a word or a sentence in the commentary of Sayana, as he has himself told me, and in the end succeeding in making an easy road through the forest of Vedic literature for all others to go along. Think of him and his work, and then say what he really is to us. Of course, we need not all agree with him in all that he says in his many writings. Certainly, such an agreement is impossible. But agreement or no agreement, the fact remains that this one man has done 1,000 times more for the preservation, spreading, and appreciation of the literature of our forefathers than any of us can ever hope to do. And he has done it all with a heart which is full of the sweet balm of love and veneration. If Max Muller is thus the old pioneer of the new movement, Deussen is certainly one of its younger advance guard. Philological interest had hidden long from view the gems of thought and spirituality to be found in the mine of our ancient scriptures. Max Muller brought out a few of them and exhibited them to the public gaze, compelling attention to them by means of his authority as the foremost philologist. Deussen, unhampered by any philological learnings and possessing the training of a philosopher, singularly well versed in the speculations of ancient Greece and modern Germany, took up the cue and plunged boldly into the metaphysical depths of the Upanishads, found them to be fully safe and satisfying, and then, equally boldly, declared that fact before the whole world. Deussen is certainly the freest among scholars in the expression of his opinion about the Vedanta. He never stops to think about the what they would say of the vast majority of scholars. We indeed require bold men in this world to tell us bold words about truth, and nowhere is this more true now than in Europe, where, through the fear of social opinion and such other causes, there has been enough in all conscience of the whitewashing and apologizing attitude among scholars towards creeds and customs, which in all probability not many among them really believe in. The greater is the glory, therefore, to Max Muller and Deussen for their bold and open advocacy of truth. May they be as bold in showing to us our defects, the later corruptions in our thought systems in India, especially in their application to our social needs. Just now, we very much require the help of such genuine friends as these to check the growing virulence of the disease, very prevalent in India, of running either to the one extreme of slavish panegyrists who cling to every village superstition as the innermost essence of the Shastras, or to the other extreme of demoniacal denouncers who see no good in us and in our history, and will, if they can, at once dynamite all the social and spiritual organizations of our ancient land of religion and philosophy.